this is interesting. Michelle Bachmann just withdrew her Swiss citizenship. Amazing. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Earlier this week, our intelligence agencies stopped a potential terrorist attack. Al-Qaeda's plan to blow up an American-bound airliner with an underwear bomb was stopped when the CIA caught wind of what was going on. At least that's what we think happened. Turns out that the guy who was going to blow up the plane was actually working for the CIA and the Saudi government, so he really wasn't a threat at all. But had it not been him, it might have been somebody who was. But in any case, putting that aside, we did just recently stop another bomber from taking down one of our airlines, and we did it this time without the help of the Saudis or an undercover CIA agent. We did it with good old-fashioned TSA detective work. I'll give you a hint. Their weapon of choice was not an underwear bomb, but it could have been a diaper bomb. Meet 18-month-old Rihanna, the latest threat to our nation's security.
A JetBlue employee told them they had to get off the plane. Agents from the Transportation Security Agency, the TSA, needed to speak to them.
And I said, for what? And he said, well, it's not you or your husband. Your daughter was flagged as no-fly. I said, excuse me?
It's absurd.
It made no sense.
Why would an 18-month-old child be on a no-fly list?
That's Rihanna's parents and the reporter for the TV station down there. The very thing that Representative Louis Gohmert was talking about when he warned us all about terror babies. So what happened here, this couple got on this plane with their 18-month-old. They were taken off, and they were told it's because your 18-month-old is suspicious. Now, mom was wearing a hijab, and, well, we'll get to that. Luckily, Rihanna's nefarious plot was foiled by the TSA on Tuesday before we lost a JetBlue flight out of Fort Lauderdale Airport. You see, the TSA had done its job and protected America by putting 18-month-old, not year-old, month-old Rihanna on a no-fly list before she could do any damage. Rihanna's parents, who are American citizens from New Jersey, just like their daughter, they were told they were free to fly, but they had to leave their terrorist Rihanna 18-month-old behind. Year-and-a-half-old kid. So, 1 point for America, 0 for the terrorists. And that's just the latest bomb plot foiled by the TSA. A few weeks ago, the TSA stopped another potential terrorist, 7-year-old Dina Frank, who suffers from cerebral palsy. Remember that one? Unlike Rihanna, Dina doesn't look like she's from Middle Eastern descent, so this was an especially good catch by the TSA. She was stopped from boarding the plane and forced to miss her flight because the TSA had to make sure she didn't have plastic explosives stashed in her crutches. There was also a young boy who they thought maybe had a bomb wired to his wheelchair. That was a couple weeks ago. Thankfully, the TSA did their job of making America safe by feeling him up before he was capable of taking down an American airliner, too. So should we all take a moment right now and thank the TSA for groping one child after another so that we can all sleep better at night knowing our skies are safe from Louis Gohmert's terror babies? Of course, to all the Americans who aren't afraid of terror babies blowing up planes, then all of this must look pretty damn silly. It must look like security theater. And when you're taking 18-month-old children off airplanes and groping disabled kids to check for bombs, and it's not just security theater, it's security theater of the absurd. And those of us who aren't living every day in fear of terrorists are taken aback by just how crazy and fearful the United States has become. How did we become a nation of frightened cowards? In my opinion, Bush and Cheney made us this way. Former National Security Advisor in the Clinton administration, Sandy Berger, told me, in fact, he told me out loud on this program, that Bill Clinton had told George W. Bush when they handed off the presidency to him in January of 2001 that Osama bin Laden was planning to attack America and Bush should do something about it, that it should be his #1 priority. Al Gore delivered the same message to Dick Cheney, as did Berger to Condi Rice. So Bush appointed Cheney to head up a task force to look into it in February 2001, but that task force never met until September of 2001. Instead, Cheney spent all his time working with oil industry executives carving up the oil fields in Iraq before we even invaded there. So then in the summer of 2001, August 6th, the CIA became so alarmed that an attack on America by al-Qaeda was so imminent that they sent a special agent to Crawford, Texas, to personally brief President George W. Bush about it. Here's Condoleezza Rice describing the title of that briefing.
I really don't remember, Commissioner, whether I discussed this with the President.
And I ask you whether you recall the title of that PDB.
I believe the title was Bin Laden Determined to Attack Inside the United States.
There you go. By the way, the station that gave us the clip, or from who aired the clip of Rihanna, was WPBF. So what did Bush do after we learned that New York and Washington, D.C. were almost certainly going to be attacked in the next few months? And Cheney had totally dropped the ball on doing anything to prevent it? What did he do? He decided to extend his presidential vacation in Texas out to be the longest presidential vacation in the history of the U.S. presidency. Then after almost a month with no attacks, Bush still had to do something. He had to go someplace, but he was still afraid to go to Washington, D.C. So instead, he flew to Florida, where his brother, Governor Jeb Bush, put the entire state on a high-security lockdown. And George W. Bush sat in Florida waiting for the attack. It came while he was in an elementary school classroom reading My Pet Goat to a group of kids. And then he sat there for 7 long minutes, scared out of his mind after hearing that the World Trade Center had gone down and another plane was heading across Pennsylvania towards Washington, D.C. When all that was done, he then hopped on Air Force One and hopscotched from Florida to Louisiana to Nebraska, afraid to set down very long anywhere, just picking up fuel and moving on. Scared to death. Cheney, meanwhile, was hiding in an underground bunker below the White House. And these two fearful and incompetent men have left us this horrible legacy. After flying around the country on Air Force One after 9/11 and being afraid to go back to Washington, D.C., George W. Bush took his own fears and spilled them out onto the rest of the nation. He and Cheney and Rumsfeld warned us of the constant threat of terrorism and spoke about mushroom clouds over American cities and rogue dictators stocking up on weapons of mass destruction. They scared us into 2 wars abroad and convinced us our safety at home depended on giving up our civil liberties. And thus came the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act that says the president can arrest and hold you forever without charges just because he decided to. We responded to Bush's fear-mongering by declaring you and me terrorist suspects if we want to board a plane and forcing us to be x-rayed, have our nude bodies put on display, or be groped by TSA agents. This is national hysteria. And even today, more than 3 years after Bush and his fear machine left the White House, and long after European countries started letting people keep their shoes on, we're all still behaving like we're scared to death and pulling our kids off planes and branding them as would-be bombers. 18-month-old Rihanna is not a terrorist. Neither is 7-year-old Dina Frank. They're just kids. And we're all supposed to be citizens living in the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's time we started acting like it. I got to tell you, I personally am not afraid. It is not possible to create a nation or an air infrastructure or anything else that is absolutely completely secure. We don't have absolute security. 50,000 people in America die every year just from car accidents. 500,000 people die in the United States every year. 470,000 died last year from tobacco. And some of those were secondhand exposures. Life is not safe. Life is not secure. But in this obsession to make our planes so safe and so, you know what makes me feel comfortable when I get on a plane? Because I do a fair amount of flying. I've got 2 million miles on one airline and 1 million on another. The thing that makes me feel safe now, post 9/11, is not the airport security. That I think is largely useless. I can see a magnetometer. Okay, I understand that. X-ray my luggage, I don't care. But X-ray me? No thanks. The thing that makes me feel safe on an airplane is the other people on the plane with me. I mean, they took out a pilot, they took out a flight attendant the other day because they were acting crazy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We are Americans. We're not cowards. We're not afraid. We don't need this security theater anymore, thank you very much. Let's start behaving like grown-ups.